Yeah, I think that was really disappointing because it's our own local news station. When they first came out, they were just kind of regurgitating what the EPA said. Oh, the EPA said everything's fine, and but for the most part, they haven't really clearly, said a message about what's actually going on here, and that there's a lot of people that are really sick, that are not doing well. This is just like a crisis, a disaster. We're in a state of emergency that they declared.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Jordan. Happy to be joined by Jody. Unfortunately, you are like many others in the area of Northern California, not feeling wonderful. As we record, it's 2 weeks since this massive lithium battery fire. From what I could tell from local media attention, the very little attention that's going on, the health symptoms of residents seem to be pretty minimal in terms of how they're describing them. They're kind of minimizing it, in my opinion. The LA Times did a story that didn't even mention health symptoms. But you, like others I've spoken to, you are having some pretty significant issues, which you've been coughing a little bit. And when you left for a few days, symptoms went away, come back right away. So let's start from the beginning. You live about 8 or so miles away?
Yeah, like about 8 or 9 miles from the plant.
Mm-hmm. And when the fire first started, did you start feeling symptoms right away?
Well, the fire started on Thursday, and I was mostly inside on Thursday, so I didn't really notice anything. It was more so on Friday, and I was told that's the day that the plant actually had an explosion while the fire was going on. I had stepped outside, and I wasn't out there very long, and I just immediately started feeling severely congested. Like just my nose was so plugged up, it was almost hard to breathe. I started noticing that I was kind of having some lung pain, just some pain in my chest. And I was kind of like, oh gosh, what's going on? Because I've lived here my whole life, but I moved to Southern California for a couple years. I was right by the Santa Ana fires. I wouldn't have any effects like this. I haven't had any allergies. I used to live in Santa Cruz. I now live in Marina, and I've lived here for a couple years. I haven't had any allergy problems. So I go outside, and in a short amount of time, I'm having these kind of severe symptoms. And
what were the symptoms?
just my nose was completely congested. I started feeling short of breath. I was having some lung pain that was coming on, just started not feeling good. And that's kind of when it started. And then I came back inside, and then I was, kind of in the middle of cleaning the house, and had gone outside for a little bit to do a couple things out there. And then I noticed I just started not continuing to not feel well. I started feeling really winded. Like as I was doing stuff, it was like my chest was hurting. I felt really winded. It was hard to even continue cleaning. And I actually just kind of gave up and on trying to do that. And then I started to feel very lethargic, which is something I read about later on that some other people had experienced, but it was just this feeling of just extreme lethargy. And I mean, it just happened and started kind of progressively getting worse. And then I think it was a few days, maybe the third day after that, I actually got like a nosebleed. And just have not been feeling well at all. And
Are you generally, before this, fairly healthy?
yeah, I don't have any like chronic health issues. I don't have any, problems with my health, with anything with my breathing, or, I haven't, like I said, have any kind of allergies or anything. And then I was seeing on the news that the EPA was saying that everything, was fine, but that they weren't going to test the soil.
There are currently no plans to test the soil or waterways.
Some would say, why not just do it now? We got EPA here, we've got the federal resources here, let's just do it. Have them do it.
I don't necessarily think that would be prudent, just to pull samples when we don't necessarily know what we're looking for.
And that, of course, was very concerning to me. And then my dad, he knows a lot about chemistry. I grew up and there was like a periodic table on the wall. And so I had told him, I said, it just seems funny to me that the EPA is saying that everything's fine and they don't need to test the soil. And, the hydrogen fluoride, which is the really super dangerous chemical, the EPA, when they first came out, they said all of the hydrogen fluoride was consumed in a fire. And you can watch them saying this. And I asked my dad that, and he said, he said fluoride's an element and it can't combine with oxygen, so it can't be burned. And so there's no way that it was consumed in a fire. And that was pretty scary to hear.
I spoke with a former fireman who said that is nonsense.
That was pretty scary to hear. And then he told me that I should get out of the area, period. And this is when everybody, was hearing everything was fine, but he knew something was not right about that at all. And of course, it didn't make sense to me that, there was 100,000 lithium batteries and 80% of it was burning and billowing smoke for days. And then everything, is fine with the world. And so he suggested that I leave town. And then, so I knew that there were some fires going on in LA. So I definitely, didn't want to go down south. So I went up about, I guess it's like 80, 90 miles away north towards Half Moon Bay, because I just been continuing to have these symptoms for the rest of the week. So I went out there. I don't have a lot of money, rent in California, but I stayed in a hotel just because I just kept not feeling well. And then just the first day I was there, I noticed I could suddenly breathe again. And by the second day, I started feeling a lot better. And somebody even asked, maybe did you get a cold or something, which is weird. I just stepped outside and suddenly that happened. But, you never know. But when I was in Half Moon Bay, all of a sudden I could breathe again. And the second day, it was like almost all of my symptoms were gone.
And how far away is this from where you live?
It's about 80, 90 miles away, like towards the north, and it's up along the coast. And I started feeling significantly better, but just because of finances, I couldn't really, stay there any great length of time. So I ended up coming back on Monday. And then it was like, I started just feeling so, and then it was again by Tuesday, I started just having the symptoms coming back again and not feeling well. And it's to the point where it's like I just feel really unwell, and it seems to, and I have a lot of soil out front. I don't know what's out there. I see a lot of black soot like on my plants and things that are outside, from the fire. But it's every time that I go outside, it's like it gets worse. And so I almost feel like I can't even leave my house. And I did about an hour ago, which is why I'm kind of coughing and having a bit of that lung pain again.
And to be clear, you're 8 miles away. Mm-hmm. It's 2 weeks since this fire started.
Yeah.
So this is an active situation. Just because the flames are technically out doesn't mean that the chemicals aren't contaminating potentially the air, soil. Water.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Can you talk about people in your community? Have you talked to others who have similar symptoms?
Yeah, there is, as you've seen, like a whole community page that's talking about the people that are having symptoms. I'm certainly not one of the lucky ones, but I've seen people posting pictures that are pretty concerning, and they have rashes and things. And to me, they really look like chemical burns. There's some bumps and sores.
And by Friday morning, I was having metallic taste, trouble breathing. So it kind of started out with that kind of stuff, not being able to breathe, coughing, the metallic taste, the headaches that do not, no matter what I take, I can't get rid of them, and dizziness. So as the days have progressed, the days that I was gone, like on Saturday, I felt fine. Came back here and felt terrible. Yesterday, I could not breathe. I just could not breathe at all when I got up. Oh, nosebleed, that's another one. So, and I've noticed that one trending through different groups. Oh no, I don't get nosebleeds. That's not normal for me.
Right.
Same thing with the sores on my tongue. They cropped up on the top of the tongue. And those aren't normal stuff.
I realized on my face it looked like it was burned, like my cheeks and my nose, and I had kind of a large sore kind of burnt area on the side of my nose, and then on a couple little lesions. They weren't large, but they were like not really blisters, but almost like pimples or something. But the entire area of my cheeks and nose looked burned. I did go to work, which is about 22 miles away or so. So I was a little further away, got a little bit of fresh air for a few hours, but then I went home again. So my face is better now. I'm actually not at my house now.
The other major experience that we're having is lethargy. Like being here in Moss Landing, still being here today is exhausting. It's like you are so exhausted. It's overcoming. And I have, some of the people that I go to church with also expressed the same feeling, just feeling like they could go into a coma for 2 days. So if you look here on the outside, you'll see there's like this blackish tone. I don't want to touch it. And so this is something I want to get off the boat, but when the wind blows, it does help at least catch the debris. So it's not, I'm not sure what the best approach is. We're just trying to be creative and conservative.
But all those people, the lady with the rash on her face, consistent with hydrogen fluoride exposure. The lady with difficulty breathing and nosebleeds, irritation of the respiratory system to the point where she couldn't breathe. She might have, sounds like if she has an inhaler, she's got some underlying respiratory problem that will only get exacerbated from exposure to this stuff. And if it's in the house and you don't air the house out, she's going to keep getting re-exposed to that. And how do you air a house out when the stuff is still out there?
Another woman had posted that she had put a towel by the window while the fire was going on. And then when she removed the towel, some of it got on her arm and she started breaking out in this rash. And so that's kind of this scary stuff because of, the hydrogen fluoride concern about, if there was any exposure with that, if that could have, when the marine layer comes in, it kind of spreads and it can interact with water. And even if it's inactive, it can combine with salts and still create kind of, toxic chemicals that are dangerous. And then, I think a lot of people heard about, it was the San Jose State University, the marine biology department. I believe they're the ones that, nobody was, they didn't want to do the testing at first until we were really outraged about that. And so, but a university went in and did some testing and said they found like hundreds and, thousands times the amount of a lot of these, toxic heavy metals in the soil.
Yeah, and they found very high levels of nickel, manganese, cobalt, I believe it was, which are from batteries. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's just concerning. And you think of this, it was burning for, I think it was 5 days, just all of this smoke from, thousands and thousands of batteries all over the place. And then there's the concern that, that I'm having and thinking about a lot lately is what happens when we first get the first really heavy rain. And then all of that is going to be washing into the bay, and that's kind of our whole ecosystem, with the plankton and the fish and, all of that getting into, this protected marine sanctuary. It's just kind of terrifying. And then just the fact that our farmlands, like nobody that's having symptoms or even, knows about this in the area that I've talked to, they're afraid to buy the produce here. I've been told, I asked my dad, and he said that, if the area gets really heavy rains, maybe in a couple of years, you could maybe consider eating the produce again. And so that's really frightening.
And what's striking to me, first of all, it was crazy to hear the initial local health officials say, oh, yeah, we don't really find it prudent to test the soil. We don't know what we're looking for. Quickly, they changed course on that after the public outcry. But it's kind of like they're leaving people to be in the environment while they conduct testing. You would think, hey, we're going to temporarily relocate people. Yeah, be expensive, but This is health. You would think they would relocate folks while they're testing rather than keeping people like you to cough and have nosebleeds and lethargic. I mean, people are basically stuck in the, you know, we were talking off camera. It's like being a prisoner in your own home. And even when you're inside, you're still feeling symptoms.
Yeah, 100%. It is like, I do feel like a prisoner because I'm not feeling well. I'm stuck here. Like spent, a great deal of, the savings that I had just to stay away as far as I could afford to get some alleviation from some of the symptoms, but they immediately came back and it's like, I don't have, somebody that can stay with, and I work at home. And, a lot of people have talked about, moving out of the area, but of course that's a big expense too. And so a lot of us are just kind of helpless here, and we're not feeling well, and they aren't moving us out of this area. And even the initial testing that they found within a few miles of the plant showed like this is really some dangerous stuff going on. And then they're like, oh, we'll sit tight and we'll just see what happens to you while we're doing this soil testing. I mean, to me, it's crazy, and it's crazy that they didn't even want to do it in the first place, and that they were just telling us everything was fine. And now it's another thing with them doing soil testing. They already, San Jose University already released what they found, and that's not good enough to do any kind of evacuation. A lot of doctors aren't prepared, for this. They don't know about the chemicals that are in these lithium-ion batteries, and so at first people were going to their doctors and their doctors were telling them that they didn't have those kinds of tests to even test for the chemicals that we could have been exposed to. And, the county doesn't seem to be able to do anything for us. So it's incredibly scary. It really is. And yeah, I don't know what to say about it. It's terrifying, and it's terrifying to just be inside. It's terrifying not knowing what's happening to your health. Not being able to even just eat, like having to change your whole diet around and just order food from other places, just because you're afraid to even eat the produce here. Or, obviously it's a good thing La Marina Water District is a bit further away through our pipes and stuff, but there's some people that have wells, and you have to think about all of that toxic smoke getting into their well system, and then them being, around that water and taking a shower or drinking any of that water, which I hope that they're not. But that's terrifying for the people that have wells that this, sediment all fell on, and these toxic chemicals. So we're not doing well in this community, and I really wish this was, exposed. And I don't know why this isn't on every news station going on, because this affects all of our food across the entire United States as well, because we have so much farmland here. So
what have you thought about the media attention? I mean, I haven't seen any national attention on this at all, but the local media kind of seems like, they kind of just are, Vistra, the owner of the plant says X, and the county officials say Y. They kind of allude in some things I've seen to some residents are having symptoms, but it's kind of minimized. Like I said, like the Los Angeles Times did a story on it. Didn't even mention that residents were having health symptoms. It just kind of seems like the Twilight Zone, where if you go on a Facebook page, everybody's fucking sick. But the media is kind of treating it like, hey, yeah, we'll wait and see here.
Yeah, I think that was really disappointing, because it's our own local news station. So you think that they would, be supportive of the community and really kind of get the word out about what was and is going on here. And when they first came out, they were just kind of regurgitating what the EPA said. Oh, the EPA said everything's fine and everything was consumed in the fire. And I guess they didn't even fact check that. And so there wasn't really anything about that. And then we started seeing a few people coming on and wanting to talk to some people that weren't feeling well. But for the most part, they haven't really clearly, said a message about what's actually going on here, and that there's a lot of people that are really sick, that are not doing well. This is just like a crisis, a disaster. We're in a state of emergency that they declared. And I don't feel like they're, being strong enough. It's like they're playing the middleman, trying to, also pat Vistra on the back while, maybe mentioning a little things here and there. And of course, that's incredibly frustrating. And I have seen some news places starting to pick up this story and starting to pick up what's going on here. a little bit. And some of them are good, and some of them are saying, hey, these residents are saying that they're really sick. But like you said, there's other things you're reading and you're just like, what's going on? You read the LA Times and they don't even mention it. And there's other places that are even, I read something yesterday that came out and they're basically just regurgitated the same statement the EPA said in the very beginning. It's like so outdated from the first,
Right.
couple of days this happened to what's happening now. And just a lot of places are not getting out the real information about what's happening here. And that's why it's so important what you're doing and actually talking to people. And I know that we all appreciate that. And we see like, wow, somebody's actually understanding what's going on in this community. And,
Unfortunately, it's not my first rodeo with these corporate sacrifice zones. To me, unfortunately, even though each different city and town, it's a different, initial reason for the disaster. After that, they're all eerily similar. And what I'm seeing is kind of the same playbook I've seen in East Palestine and some other places where the EPA comes out. There's a very narrow evacuation zone when you have a massive plume that went who knows how far. Okay, but they set a very narrow evacuation zone. That's kind of the EPA and the local area. And then they say, 24, 48 hours. Oh, we're not finding chemicals of concern. Well, we don't, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I have shown through other stories that in many cases, the EPA's testing equipment has not been adequate. They've even acknowledged they can't with certain testing equipment. I've spoken with residents who told me they saw EPA officials testing the air in your area by rolling down their window and putting out a handheld device for 30 seconds. I asked experts, that's certainly not adequate air testing. And then, so you get like an all clear from the EPA, even though you're not dealing, the way the EPA tests is they're looking at individual chemical exposure. But this is not individual chemical exposure. This is synergistic chemical. This is multiple chemicals at once. So they're not testing for multiple humans being exposed to multiple chemicals at once. They're just testing for, let's look individually for hydrogen fluoride, et cetera. Second, then you have the company. So the EPA saying, oh, and we're also having Vistra do the testing. Well, Vistra is using an independent contractor known as CTEH, which Google it. New York Times did stuff on this. They're kind of the go-to tester for corporations that pollute the earth. BP used them. They were used during the Hurricane Katrina spill. Norfolk Southern used them. And CTEH magically never finds chemicals of concern. So it just seems to me the same playbook I saw in East Palestine and other places is being used here, where everything's fine, or no, we don't think we need to test the soil. You don't think you need to test the soil in the salad bowl of America, where it's 70% of greens come from here? To me, it just seems like I don't want people to, I'm not saying don't trust anything the government says, but common sense, people are having all these symptoms. Are you going to trust the company to do the testing, even with their independent contractor?
Yeah, and that was scary that they didn't even have any plans whatsoever and even stated that to even test the soil. And then now we're finding hundreds and thousands of times of amounts, of toxic, potentially hazardous materials. And just think if everybody bought this story and then nobody knew about this, and then it rains and it gets into the bay and then all the farms are polluted, everything's going across the United States. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, that they initially, and it was for many days, just said that, oh, we don't know what to test for. We don't, I mean, it defies belief. And believe me, I'm like no conspiracy theorist. I'm not into that stuff, but just hearing what they're saying, and it seems like they're really just trying to work with Vistra, and that they want the, income and they want the money. And that's why they're not caring about the citizens here. And they're basically trying to cover up the plan, and even the plan is using a company that helps companies cover up.
Right.
And it's clear, and this has happened in other cities, as you're well aware. So it's just absolutely horrible to think that, without people, speaking out against it and, being incredibly upset. And we're still fighting things because they wanted to test some playgrounds here where children are at. And, the school district is saying that they're not going to test the playground, the soil there. And so, we're still fighting constantly to, get them and get everyone to investigate and come and look at this, because there's a lot of people that are sick. I mean, you just see posts every day of people sick, and people are sick even up to like a 50-mile radius. It seems to me people are having symptoms and people are really sick, there's no way that this many people are sick and there's nothing going on.
Well,
and they're all having the same kinds of symptoms too. And it's just terrifying to
proof's in
wonder.
the pudding. The proof's in the pudding. And I had people tell me this in Flint, East Palestine, and elsewhere. You leave for a few days like you did, your symptoms go away, you come back, it's like clockwork. So obviously the area you're in is contaminated. You don't need to be a chemist to understand it. To what degree, we don't know. I'd like to ask you about Governor Newsom's role here, because it's clear he's got higher political ambitions. Based on my research and reporting, he's been a champion of these clean energy. I'm not against clean energy at all. I'm not even against, electric cars or this and that. But I don't care if it's a fossil fuel plant. I don't care if it's a fracking plant, mining, or clean energy. It has to be safe. I mean, you have to be following regulations. It has to be, the stuff has to be stored properly. There has to be an emergency plan if there's an issue, which there doesn't seem to be one here. All I've seen from Newsom, in fairness, dealing with the LA wildfires, but all I've heard from him is, yeah, we need an investigation. Well, that's easy to say, we need an investigation, but wasn't he instrumental in putting this here? And what do you think of his response to all this?
Well, I think that the technology obviously is not safe. And as we know, this isn't the first kind of fire that they had in these kinds of facilities. And that is all he's said, is that there's going to be an investigation. And the city, a lot of the city council people just kind of put this in, and people that even go to all of these meetings, they didn't even hear about this kind of going in. And it's just, I can tell you that, like, there's nobody.
They didn't hear about this plant.
No, going in. Yeah. I've seen people talking about, well, I've been to every single meeting and we didn't even hear about, this plant. And so many people that actually live here didn't even know it was a lithium ion battery plant. I mean, that's incredible that they could just kind of put that in there. But clearly, nobody's against the environment, nobody's against clean energy. But if we're just building something and you let this fire burn out for days and days and days and on end, just billowing toxic smoke, like who knows how far, and not having any plan to actually put a fire like that out. I mean, that's just, how does that make any sense to use technology like that, where it's like, okay, well, if something happens, we're just going to have it burning for days on end, just toxic, lithium ion battery smoke and potentially extremely deadly, chemicals. It's just absolutely irresponsible. And if this technology is not safe, it doesn't matter if it's like the intent is for a good cause, and it absolutely should not exist. And it's just the way that it's set up now in these buildings and stuff. They need to just work on a different technology, because this is absolutely not safe, and this isn't good for anyone. And this has completely damaged the environment. Talk about like going green. We're in a protected marine sanctuary. We have, certain animals that are only in this area, and to put all of that at risk, I mean, it's just illogical. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't think this technology is something that should be used at all after this kind of experience. There needs to be something much safer, and they need to get together and start inventing something else, because this is not it. This is not something we want, or, let alone they built it here, which is a crazy place to build something like this. I just don't think it's the right technology that we need to be moving forward into any kind of, green or helping the earth or doing anything like that,
And lastly, what's your message to everyone else watching across the country? Because I think I think, most people hear about environmental disasters and you feel bad for those communities, but you kind of think it doesn't have anything to do with you. It's not your community, right? but I feel like more and more people are starting to realize, like, oh, you know what, this is popping up a lot more all over the country, and maybe I should pay attention. Do you have a message for other people in terms of, like, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, which is becoming more and more of a thing now?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I've even, tried to talk to people about what's going on that don't live close to the area, and they don't seem to get it, and I don't know why they don't get it. And I'm trying to explain how serious this is. But this affects everyone because, like you say, this is like known as the salad bowl of America. So all of this produce, if they don't do anything, and we're fighting to prevent this here on the ground from this happening, that this food that could be, contaminated, these definitely go into the soil and they go into the plants. And this could be sent out to everybody, if they did manage to just, shrug it off, the air's fine. And then, who knows what the heck, could have happened with these, fruits and vegetables from our area going out across the United States. So people need to, really take this seriously, because this concerns everybody, and this concerns everybody's health. It's, in the United States, because there's a lot of crops that are only grown here in our area. And so people need to really take this seriously. You don't want to be eating some toxic stuff, and then, all of a sudden people start getting more cancers or more, who knows what going on, eating these things for years and years, depending on their diet and how much of the local produce here they're going to be consuming. And that could have serious impacts on their health. I mean, this stuff's no joke that, exploded and got everywhere for 5 days of toxic smoke all over our land. It's going to rain and it's going to sink into the ground. I mean, this is really serious, and people really need to take this serious.
Absolutely. I'm sorry for you and your neighbors, what you're dealing with and your health problems. It's not a way to live, to be stuck in your house and not be able to leave your house. And even when you're in your house, still feel sick. It's crazy. We're the wealthiest country on earth. They should evacuate you and temporarily put you up somewhere far away. Obviously, that's disruptive, if you have kids or, everyone's got, lives, and it's not easy to get up and leave, but it's better than long-term health damage. So I'll definitely stay in touch with you, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks so much.